This is a humbling business. And every time you think you know it or you think you're getting on top of it, something new happens and changes. If you're not constantly trying and testing new things, you're never really going to know.
Welcome to another episode of the Ecommerce Toolbox Experts Perspective. Joining us today, we have David Cost. David is the Chief Digital Officer at Rainbow Shops. They have over 1,000 shops in the US. So welcome, David. Really excited to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. I always like to kick things off by learning a bit more about your background and how you ended up in your role. So maybe you can walk us through your career journey and how you ended up in the role that you're in today.
Yeah, so my career's been I kind of describe it as being split in thirds. I spent the first third doing consulting, some general management consulting and technology consulting. I spent the middle third. I founded an early internet company called PriceScan that was in the price comparison space and did that for about 14 years. And then kind of being in that price comparison space, we saw the birth of e-commerce online and then kind of took everything that I had observed through that early process and then brought it to the world of retail. And that's been kind of the last third.
Love it. Building on that, obviously over your last 10 years at Rainbow Shops, I'm assuming you've seen a lot of consumer expectation changes and just around personalization, around commerce experience. Maybe talk us through how some of your mental models on how you stay agile and how you adjust to changing consumer demands.
I mean, look, I think this is a humbling business. And every time you think you know it or you think you're getting on top of it, something new happens and changes. If you're not constantly trying and testing new things, you're never really going to know. And I can give you kind of a relevant recent example, right? So we're a big omnichannel retailer. We've got a big brick and mortar footprint. But like a lot of retailers, why the customer doesn't perceive any silo or any difference between the online and in-store, we always create those barriers internally. So to kind of make a long story short, we finally got the tech to be able to what we call ship to store. So give the customer the option to pick up a package in store rather than ship it to their home. Shipping costs for us are greatly reduced when we ship it from one commercial address to another, and we can pass that along to the customer. We turned that on, and almost overnight, it became a third of all of our orders. Now, nobody anticipated that a third of our online order volume was going to shift to this ship to store. But it just goes to show you sometimes you don't know until you give something a try.
That's a really, really, really cool thing. Obviously, you folks have over 1,000 brick and mortar stores. That could be a competitive advantage, especially against some of the more D2C brands that you guys compete with online. Outside of the example that you mentioned earlier, do you have any other examples of how you've leveraged your large physical footprint to make your online experience better or just drive more synergies in sales for Rainbow?
So look, I think during COVID, we got to run the scary experiment. What happens when you close 1,000 stores? How much of that business shifts online? And the answer is not as much as you think. I mean, while the online business did really well during the shutdown, it was a small fraction of what we did brick and mortar. So we still live in a brick and mortar world. And you look brand after brand after brand, how many DTC brands that started online only have found that they can't continue to grow without opening brick and mortar. So I think if you really want to optimize your retail footprint, you need to have both stores and online, and you need to offer that customer kind of a seamless experience in terms of being able to shop that.
Why do you think that is, out of curiosity, for your category? And maybe it's category specific, but why do you think it is that brick and mortar is such a key critical element of an omnichannel strategy?
Look, again, I don't think it just applies to us. I mean, there's been case studies with Warby Parker. When Warby Parker opens a brick and mortar store, not only do sales in that physical store go up, but so do online sales. There is a real synergy there. And because we all every day seamlessly move between the physical world and the digital world, we shouldn't expect anything different in terms of retail. Sometimes people use the website as a pre-shop before they come in the store. Some people just like flipping through, especially clothing in a store where you can feel the merchandise, pick it up, go try it on, see how it looks on you, right? There are things that you could do physically that you just can't do digitally. So, I mean, I think having only one channel, you're always going to sub-optimize, where you would be if you had to.
Makes sense. Moving forward, a lot of brands, especially D2C brands, and I know you guys aren't like a D2C native brand, but a lot of these D2C native brands started off thinking they were kind of like technology companies. So they looked at the website like a technology asset that they had to effectively innovate. So hire engineers and kind of go down that path. And one of the most debated one is the checkout process, right? So you have one of two paths. You can go standard, maybe frictionless, or you can make it custom and bespoke to you. What are your kind of thoughts on that? And how have you approached it for Rainbow Shops when it comes to specifically the technology and the checkout?
So I've actually experienced both versions of that. So we were on Demandware slash Salesforce Commerce Cloud for 10, 11, 12 years, where checkout was your baby. You could do anything with it you wanted. We replatformed to Shopify about 3.5 years ago. And in Shopify, that checkout's pretty locked down. I mean, there's some customization you can do, but it's pretty locked down. I think the Shopify method is the superior one, having experienced both. And kind of here's why. Checkout is not the place you want to innovate. So in a brick and mortar store, for example, when somebody is ready to check out, your job is to get their payment, get their goods in a bag, and get them out of the store as quickly as you can. Nobody wants to stand in line. You want to make that checkout experience as fast and frictionless as possible. The more friction you introduce, the more people can just say, look, it's not worth it today, I'll leave. And I find the same thing online. People aren't looking for anything unique in checkout. They're looking to see how quickly can I get it done, especially in a world now that is we're 90% mobile. So checkout on a mobile phone is a much more painful process than it was even on a desktop. Shopify Shop Pay mechanism, that digital payment wallet that they've been able to develop, really gives us Amazon-like capabilities, right? So somebody who's checked out on any Shopify merchant before, with a phone number and email address, can be a click away from being done. That's something that can only be done at scale. And again, I look every day, I think we compete against people like Amazon or Walmart who have thousands of engineers. I'm a retailer. I don't have thousands of engineers. I need technology partners that give us those capabilities. And when we look at an Amazon checkout, kind of the second best checkout available after Amazon is Shopify, which was a big part of the reason of why we did the replatform.
That's interesting. So where do you feel like you need to innovate on your website, or are you taking more of the stance that the clothing itself will that's the core product? Or do you actually feel like you have to innovate maybe with search or how your PDP is displayed or UI UX? Like, how are you looking at the website as an asset?
I mean, look, I think there's lots of things we can do on the front end to make a difference. We spent a lot of time playing with search. We ultimately partnered with Google for that. Who's the strongest person in the world in search? It's Google, right? So being able to bring Google's tech to our website front end has given us, we think, a real advantage. And in kind of all my years of doing this, the amount of time we would spend trying to manually sculpt search with all of the other search providers, with Google, we don't touch it. With AI and machine learning, with them they see 1 billion shopping searches a day. And then being able to bring those learnings to our website gives us the same capabilities that the big guys have. I think there's lots of things we can do around how we display product, how we organize product, how we merchandise product, segmentation things we can do. There's lots of optimizations we can do on the front end. We talk about this ship to store. I mean, again, we had no expectation that ship to store was going to be as popular as it was. But there's yet kind of another example of why you have to constantly be thinking and trying new things to continue to move the needle.
I love it. Maybe talk us through an experiment. You talked us through something that you launched that you didn't really understand or you didn't foresee having a huge positive impact. Is there anything that you folks in the last 10 years did as like an iteration or a test that you thought was going to have great results, but ultimately didn't for your business? Maybe talk us through kind of the other side of that equation. Any big projects that you did that you thought would be great that didn't go so hot?
Look, I think if I look at kind of the bucket of technology things we've tried that we've been disappointed in, they almost are all around marketing attribution. I think advertising attribution and marketing attribution is such a hard, gnarly kind of problem to solve. And every time we think we found something that's different or has a different approach to it, that we think is going to finally give us the secret sauce to understand what's going on, we end up being disappointed.
That's interesting. So if that's the case, earlier on, You mentioned that you don't care if they buy in store or online. How do you ensure as like a digital executive that you don't get into like attribution issues where you're doing the right thing for the business by sending people to the brick and mortar store through a flow on the website, but then you're unable to capture the in-store? Or have you figured out a mechanism for attribution where you could actually attribute it as like an online influence sale? Maybe talk us through that, because that's something that when I chat with the digital execs, it's kind of like an issue that they face. And everyone will always say, hey, we'll do the right thing for the business. But at the end of the day, you got to hit your numbers too.
Yeah. Look, I think I'm lucky. I report to the owners of the business. And because it's their business, they understand this concept of it doesn't really matter which channel they buy in. We just want them to buy Rainbow. So look, I feel pretty fortunate in that case. I will tell you, the bigger your brick and mortar footprint is, the harder this attribution game gets. We have very little visibility in terms of what the customer does in store. We know there's lots of kind of cross-shopping behavior, but it's not behavior we're able to put numbers behind. And I'll give you kind of a concrete example of this. So we send out shopping cart abandonment messages via SMS. So we'll say like, you got a pair of great boots in your cart, blah, blah, blah. We'll get customers, for whatever reason, perceive SMS is coming from a person, not being automated. So they'll like answer back like they're talking to somebody, and they'll say, well, I just bought these boots. And we'll go online and check to see, is there a problem with the tech? Did it miss? Is there a timing issue? And no, they did not place an online order for it. So our guess is the customer bought it in store. So you can kind of see in real time, here's somebody who shopped the online store, added it to cart because they use the cart like a wish list. Even though we have wish list functionality, using the cart as a wish list is kind of a default behavior. They went in the store, found the item, bought it, but because we were unable to see it or match those two things up, we acted like this was somebody who abandoned their cart on the website, which makes us seem a little tone deaf to the user in terms of how we message or market to them.
That's interesting. Do you ever think that'll be a solved problem? Like, you've built companies before. Do you think that's like a business to start?
Here's how we're thinking about it. So the only way we've come up with to do it would be, we need to have a loyalty program. We need the incentive to join that loyalty program to be strong enough. And we thought we'd do it that it would be app-based. So we have native apps for both iOS and Android. You download the app, you'd set up an account, it would give you a free loyalty card on the app. And then every time you checked out, if it's online, it's easy to grab that information. But in store, it would present a barcode or a QR code that we would scan with every transaction. And that would let us see that person across both channels. Now, we need that incentive to be strong enough that they're going to want to spend the time and effort to download the app, get the card, and show the card at checkout. But there are some examples in the real world where some loyalty programs can get a 95% plus acceptance rate. And so those are the kinds of things we're exploring to see, can we finally bridge that gap and fill that piece of knowledge that we just don't have?
How's app from a high level for you guys? When did you guys launch it? How's it performing relative to website? Curious, just high level.
So I've been a native app believer for years. I mean, we've had apps at Rainbow for 8 years now through various providers. I mean, my take on that is, I think customers naturally fall into two camps. There are people who prefer web and people who prefer app. In our case, there's no functional difference between the website and the app. They behave in the same way. But about 20% of customers prefer the app. And those customers have a higher average order value and have a higher conversion rate. So as the technology has gotten easier and that lift has gotten easier, there's no reason not to have an app. On top of it, we then pick up the ability to send push notifications. And in a world where, email's declining every day, I think we've probably reached peak SMS, way too much SMS, and people are starting to tune out. Push is yet another really valuable way to be able to talk to customers. And push is essentially free. So being able to send push through that native app is really powerful. That's why we're looking at, could we really create a scenario where we had every Rainbow customer to have the app have push notifications enabled with a loyalty incentive? And what would the ability of having both the visibility of that data and that communication channel open, how can we do that to continue to drive the business?
Love it, David. This was super educational, especially on the omnichannel conversation. Really appreciate your time. Also follow your posts on LinkedIn. So if you folks want to connect with David, it's just David Koss, correct?
That's correct.
Awesome. Well, thanks, David. Really appreciate your time and excited to publish this to the listeners.
All right. You're welcome. Thanks so much.
The E-commerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives is brought to you by Noibu. To find out more about Noibu and how we can help you debug your e-commerce site and rocket your revenue, visit www.noibu.com. That's Noibu.com. And then make sure to search for the E-commerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Noibu, thanks for listening.